Vedanta in Privilege, delivered in London. We have nearly finished the metaphysical portion of the Advaita. One point, and perhaps the most difficult to understand, remains. We have seen so far that, according to the Advaita theory, all we see around us in the whole universe, in fact, is the evolution of that one Absolute. This is called in Sanskrit Brahman. The Absolute has become changed into the whole of nature. But here comes the difficulty. How is it possible for the Absolute to change? What made the Absolute to change? By its very definition, the Absolute is unchangeable. Change of the unchangeable would be a contradiction. The same difficulty applies to those who believe in a personal God. For instance, how did this creation arise? It could not have arisen out of nothing. That would be a contradiction. Something coming out of nothing can never be. The effect is the cause in another form. Out of the seed the big tree grows. The tree is the seed, plus air and water taken in. And if there were any method of testing the amount of air and the water taken in to make the body of the tree, we should find that it is exactly the same as the effect the tree. Modern science has proved beyond doubt that it is so, that the cause is the effect in another form. The adjustment of the parts of the cause changes and becomes the effect, so we have to avoid this difficulty of having a universe without a cause, and we are bound to admit that God has become the universe. But we have avoided one difficulty and landed into another. In every theory, the idea of God comes through the idea of unchangeability. We have traced historically how the one idea which we have always in mind in a search for God, even in its crudest form, is the idea of freedom. And the idea of freedom and of unchangeability is one and the same. It is the free alone which never changes, and the unchangeable alone which is free. For change is produced by something exterior to a thing or within itself which is more powerful than the surrounding. Everything which can be changed is necessarily bound by certain cause or causes which cannot be unchangeable. Supposing God has become this universe, then God is here and is changed. And suppose the infinite has become this finite universe, so much of the infinite is gone, and therefore God is infinite minus the universe. A changeable God would be no God. To avoid this doctrine of pantheism, there is a very bold theory of the Vedanta. It is that this universe, as we know and think it, does not exist, that the unchangeable has not changed, that the whole of this universe is mere appearance and not reality, that this idea of parts and little beings and differentiation is only apparent, not the nature of the thing itself. God has not changed at all, and has not become the universe at all. We see God as the universe because we have to look through time, space, and causation. It is time, space, and causation that make this differentiation apparently, but not really. This is a very bold theory indeed. Now this theory ought to be explained a little more clearly. It does not mean idealism in the sense in which it is generally understood. It does not say that this universe does not exist. It exists, but at the same time, it is not what we take it for. To illustrate this, the example given by the Advaita philosophy is well known. In the darkness of night, a stump of a tree is looked upon as a ghost by some superstitious person, as a policeman by a robber, as a friend by someone waiting for his companion. In all these cases, the stump of the tree did not change. But there are apparent changes, and these changes were in the minds of those who saw it. From the subjective side, we can understand it better through psychology. There is something outside of ourselves, the true nature of which is unknown and unknowable to us. Let us call it X. And there is something inside which is also unknown and unknowable to us. Let us call it Y. The knowable is a combination of X plus Y. And everything that we know, therefore, must have two parts, the X outside and the Y inside. And the X plus Y is the thing we know. So every form in the universe is partly our creation and partly something outside. Now what the Vedanta holds is that this X and this Y are one and the same. A very similar conclusion has been arrived at by some Western philosophers, especially by Herbert Spencer and some other modern philosophers. When it is said that the same power which is manifesting itself in the flower is welling up in my own consciousness, it is the very same idea which the Vedantists want to preach, that the reality of the external world and the reality of the internal world are one and the same. Even the ideas of the internal and external exist by differentiation and do not exist in the things themselves. For instance, if we develop another sense, the whole world will change for us, showing that it is the subject which will change the object. If I change, the external world changes. The theory of the Vedanta, therefore, comes to this, that you and I and everything in the universe are that absolute, not parts but the whole. You are the whole of that absolute, and so are all others, because the idea of part cannot come into it. These divisions, these limitations, are only apparent, not in the thing itself. I am complete and perfect, and I was never bound, boldly preaches the Vedanta. If you think you are bound, bound you will remain. If you know that you are free, free you are. Thus the end and aim of this philosophy is to let us know that we have been always free and shall remain free forever. We never change, we never die, and we are never born. What are all these changes then? What becomes of this phenomenal world? This world is admitted as an apparent world, bound by time, space, and causation, and it comes to what is called the Vivarta Vada in Sanskrit, evolution of nature, and manifestation of the Absolute. The Absolute does not change or re-evolve. In the little amoeba is that infinite perfection latent. It is called amoeba from its amoeba covering, and from the amoeba to the perfect man the change is not in what is inside, that remains the same, unchangeable, but the change occurs in the covering. There is a screen here and some beautiful scenery outside. There is a small hole in the screen through which we can only catch a glimpse of it. Suppose this hole begins to increase, and as it grows larger and larger, more and more of the scenery comes into view. And when the screen has vanished, we come face to face with the whole of the scenery. This scene outside is the soul, and the screen between us and the scenery is Maya, time, space, and causation. There is a little hole somewhere, through which I can catch only a glimpse of the soul. When the hole is bigger, I see more and more. And when the screen has vanished, I know that I am the soul. So changes in the universe are not in the Absolute, they are in nature. Nature evolves more and more, until the Absolute manifests itself. In everyone it exists. In some it is manifested more than others. The whole universe is really one. In speaking of the soul, to say that one is superior to another has no meaning. In speaking of the soul, to say that man is superior to the animal or the plant has no meaning. The whole universe is one. In plants, the obstacle to soul manifestation is very great. In animals a little less, and man still less. In cultured spiritual men still less. And in perfect men it has vanished altogether. All our struggles, exercises, pains, pleasures, tears, smiles, all that we do and think tend towards the goal, the tearing up of the screen, making the whole bigger, thinning the layers that remain between the manifestation and the reality behind. Our work, therefore, is not to make the soul free, but to get rid of the bandages. The sun is covered by layers of cloud, but remains unaffected by them. The work of the wind is to drive the clouds away, and the more the clouds disappear, the more the light of the sun appears. There is no change whatsoever in the soul, infinite, absolute, eternal, knowledge, bliss, and existence. Neither can there be birth or death for the soul. Dying and being born, reincarnation and going to heaven cannot be for the soul. These are different appearances, different mirages, different dreams. If a man who is dreaming of this world now dreams of wicked things and wicked deeds, after a certain time, the thought of that very dream will produce the next dream. He will dream that he is in a horrible place being tortured. The man who is dreaming good thoughts and good deeds, after that period of a dream is over, will dream he is in a better place, and so on from dream to dream. But the time will come when the whole of this dream will vanish. To every one of us there must come a time when the whole universe will be found to have been a mere dream, when we shall find that the soul is infinitely better than its surrounding. In this struggling through what we call our environment, there will come a time when we shall find that these environments were almost zero in comparison with the power of the soul. It is only a question of time, and time is nothing in the infinite. It is a drop in the ocean. We can afford to wait and be calm. Consciously or unconsciously, therefore, the whole universe is going towards that goal. The moon is struggling to get out of the sphere of attraction of other bodies and will come out of it in the long run. But those who consciously strive to get free hasten the time. One benefit from this theory we practically see is that the idea of a real universal love is only possible from this point of view. All of our fellow passengers, our fellow travelers, all life, plants, animals, not only my brother man, but my brother brute, my brother plant, Not only my brother the good, but my brother the evil, my brother the spiritual, and my brother the wicked. They are all going to the same goal. All are in the same stream. Each is hurrying towards that infinite freedom. We cannot stay the course. None can stay it. None can go back. However he may try, he will be driven forward, and in the end he will attain to freedom. Creation means a struggle to get back to freedom, the center of our being, whence we have been thrown off, as it were. The very fact that we are here shows that we are going towards the center, and the manifestation of this attraction towards the center is what we call love. The question is asked, from what does this universe come? In what does it remain? To what does it go back? And the answer is, from love it comes, in love it remains, back to love it goes. Thus we are in a position to understand that, whether one likes it or not, there is no going back for anyone. Everyone has to get to the center, however he may struggle to go back. Yet if we struggle consciously, knowingly, it will smooth the passage, it will lessen the jar, and quicken the time. Another conclusion we naturally arrive at from this is that all knowledge and all power are within and not without. What we call nature is a reflecting glass. That is all the use of nature. And all knowledge is this reflection of the within on this glass of nature. What we call powers, secrets of nature, and force are all within. In the external world are only a series of changes. There is no knowledge in nature. All knowledge comes from the human soul. Man manifests knowledge, discovers it within himself, which is pre-existing through eternity. Everyone is the embodiment of knowledge. Everyone is the embodiment of eternal bliss and eternal existence. The ethical effect is just the same, as we have seen elsewhere with regard to equality. But the idea of privilege is the bane of human life. Two forces, as it were, are constantly at work, one making caste and the other breaking caste. In other words, the one making for privilege, the other breaking down privilege. And whenever privilege is broken down, more and more light and progress come to a race. This struggle we see all around us. Of course, there is first the brutal idea of privilege, that of the strong over the weak. There is the privilege of wealth. If a man has more money than another, he wants a little privilege over those who have less. There is still subtler and more powerful privilege of intellect. Because one man knows more than others, he claims more privilege. And the last of all, and the worst, because the most tyrannical, is the privilege of spirituality. If some persons think they know more of spirituality of God, they claim a superior privilege over everyone else. They say, "Come down and worship us, ye common herds. We are messengers of God, and ye have to worship us." None can be Vedantists and at the same time admit of privilege to anyone, either mental, physical, or spiritual. Absolutely no privilege for anyone. The same power is in every man. The one manifesting more, the other less. The same potentiality is in everyone. Where is the claim to privilege? All knowledge is in every soul, even in the most ignorant. He has not manifested it, but perhaps he has not had the opportunity. The environment were not perhaps suitable to him. When he gets the opportunity, he will manifest it. The idea that one man is born superior to another has no meaning in the Vedanta. That between two nations, one is superior and the other inferior, has no meaning whatsoever. Put them in the same circumstance and see whether the same intelligence comes out or not. Before that, you have no right to say that one nation is superior to another. And as to spirituality, no privilege should be claimed there. It is a privilege to serve mankind, for this is the worship of God. God is here in all these human souls. He is the soul of man. What privilege can men ask? There are no special messengers of God, never were, and never can be. All beings, great or small, are equally manifestations of God. The differences is only in the manifestation. Same eternal message, which has been eternally given, comes to them little by little. The eternal message has been written in the heart of every being. It is there already, and all are struggling to express it. Some, in suitable circumstances, express it a little better than others, but as bearers of the messages, they are all one. What claim to superiority is there? The most ignorant man, the most ignorant child, is a great messenger of God as any that ever existed, and as great as any that are yet to come. For the infinite message is there imprinted once and for all in the heart of every being. Wherever there is a being, that being contains the infinite message of the Most High. It is there. The work of the Advaita, therefore, is to break down all these privileges. It is the hardest work of all, and curious to say, it has been less active than anywhere else in this land of its birth. If there is any land of privilege, it is the land which gave birth to this philosophy. Privilege for the spiritual man as well as for the man of birth. There they have not so much privilege for money. That is one of the benefits, I think, but privilege for birth and spirituality is everywhere. Once a gigantic attempt was made to preach Vedantic ethics, which succeeded to a certain extent for several hundred years, and we know historically that those years were the best times of that nation. I mean the Buddhistic attempt to break down privilege. Some of the most beautiful epithets addressed to Buddha that I remember are, "Thou the breaker of castes, destroyer of privileges, preacher of equality to all beings." So he preached this one idea of equality. Its power has been misunderstood to a certain extent in the Brotherhood of Shramanas, where we find that hundreds of attempts have been made to make them into a church with superiors and inferiors. You cannot make much of a church when they tell people they are all gods. One of the good effects of Vedanta has been freedom of religious thoughts, which India enjoyed throughout all times of its history. It is something to glory in, that in the land where there was never a religious persecution, where people are allowed perfect freedom in religion. This practical side of Vedanta morality is necessary as much today as it ever was, more necessary perhaps than it ever was. For all this privilege claiming has been tremendously intensified with the extension of knowledge. The idea of God and the devil, or Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, has a good deal of poetry in it. The difference between God and the devil is in nothing except in unselfishness and selfishness. The devil knows as much as God, is as powerful as God, only he has no holiness. That makes him a devil. Apply the same idea to the modern world. Excess of knowledge and power without holiness makes human beings devils. Tremendous power is being acquired by the manufacture of machines and other appliances, and privilege is claimed today as it never has been claimed in the history of the world. That is why the Vedanta wants to preach against it, to break down this tyrannizing over the souls of men. Those of you who have studied the Gita will remember the memorable passages. He who looks upon the learned Brahmin, upon the cow, the elephant, the dog, or the outcast with the same eye, he indeed is a sage, and the wise man. Even in this life he has conquered relative existence, whose mind is firmly fixed on the sameness. For the Lord is one and the same to all, and the Lord is pure. And therefore those who have this sameness for all and are pure are said to be living in God. This is the gist of Vedantic morality, the sameness for all. We have seen that it is the subjective world that rules the objective. Change the subject, and the object is bound to change. Purify yourself, and the world is bound to be purified. This one thing requires to be taught now more than ever before. We are becoming more and more busy about our neighbors and less about ourselves. The world will change if we change. If we are pure, the world will become pure. The question is why I should see evil in others. I cannot see evil unless I be evil. I cannot be miserable unless I am weak. Things that used to make me miserable when I was a child do not do so now. The subject changed, so the object was bound to change, so says the Vedanta. All these things, which we call causes of misery and evil, we shall laugh at when we arrive at that wonderful state of equality, that sameness. This is what is called in Vedanta attaining to freedom. The sign of approaching that freedom is more and more of the sameness and equality. In misery and happiness the same, in success and defeat the same. Such a mind is nearing that state of freedom. The mind cannot be easily conquered. Minds that rise in waves at the approach of every little thing, at the slightest provocation of danger, or in what a state they must be. What to talk of greatness or spirituality when these changes come over the mind? This unstable condition of the mind must be changed. We must ask ourselves how far we can be acted upon by the external world, and how far we can stand on our own feet in spite of all the forces outside us. When we have succeeded in preventing all the forces in the world from throwing us off our balance, then alone we have attained to freedom, and not before. That is salvation. It is here and now, and where else? It is in this moment. Out of this idea, out of this fountainhead, all beautiful streams of thought have flowed upon the world, generally misunderstood in their expression, apparently contradicting each other. We find hosts of brave and wonderfully spiritual souls in every nation, taking to caves or forests for meditation, severing their connection with the external world. This is the one idea. And on the other hand, we find bright, illustrious beings coming into society, tracing to raise their fellow men, the poor, the miserable. Apparently these two methods are contradictory. The man who lives in a cave, apart from his fellow beings, smiles contemptuously upon those who are working for the regeneration of their fellow men. How foolish, he said. What work is there? The world of Maya will always remain the world of Maya. It cannot be changed. If I ask one of our priests in India, "Do you believe in Vedanta?" he said, "That is my religion. I certainly do. That is my life." "Very well. Do you admit the equality of all life, the sameness of everything?" "Certainly I do." The next moment, when a low-caste man approaches his priest, he jumps to one side of the street to avoid that man. "Why do you jump?" "Because his very touch would have polluted me." "But you just were saying we are all the same, and you admit there is no difference in souls." He says, "Oh, that is in theory only for householders. When I go into a forest, then I will look upon everyone as the same." You ask one of your great men in England, of great birth and wealth, if he believes as a Christian in the brotherhood of mankind, since all came from God. He answers in the affirmative, but in 5 minutes he shouts something uncomplimentary about the common herd. Thus it has been a theory only for several thousand years and never came into practice. All understand it, declare it as a truth, but when you ask them to practice it, they say it will take millions of years. There was a certain king who had a huge number of courtiers, and each one of these courtiers declared he was ready to sacrifice his life for his master, and that he was the most sincere being ever born. In course of time, a sannyasin came to the king. The king said to him that there never was a king who had so many sincere courtiers as he had. The sannyasin smiled and said he did not believe that. The king said the sannyasin could test it if he liked. So the sannyasin declared that he would make a great sacrifice by which the king's reign would be extended very long, with the condition that there should be made a small tank into which each one of the courtiers should pour a pitcher of milk in the dark of night. The king smiled and said, "Is this a test?" And he asked his courtiers to come to him, and told them what was to be done. They all expressed their joyful assent to the proposal and returned. In the dead of night they came and emptied their pitchers into the tank. But in the morning it was found full of water only. The courtiers were assembled and questioned about the matter. Each one of them had thought there would be so many pitchers of milk that his water would not be detected. Unfortunately, most of us have the same idea, and we do not share work as did the courtiers in the story. There is so much idea of equality, says the priest, that my little privilege will not be detected. So say our rich men, so say the tyrants of every country. There is more hope for the tyranny over than for the tyrants. It will take a very long time for tyrants to arrive at freedom, but less time for the others. The cruelty of the fox is much more terrible than the cruelty of the lion. The lion strikes a blow and is quiet for some time afterwards, but the fox, trying persistently to follow his prey, never misses an opportunity. Priestcraft, in its nature cruel and heartless. That is why religion goes down where priestcraft arises. Says the Vedanta, we must give up the idea of privilege, then will religion come. Before that, there is no religion at all. Do you believe what Christ said? Sell all that thou hast and give it to the poor. Practical equality there, no trying to torture the text, but taking the truth as it is. Do not try to torture the text. I have heard it said that that was preached only to the handful of Jews who listened to Jesus. The same argument will apply to other things also. Do not torture text. Dare to face truth as it is. Even if we cannot reach to it, let us confess our weakness, but let us not destroy the ideal. Let us hope that we shall attain to it sometime and strive for it. There it is. Sell all that thou hast and give to the poor and follow me. Thus, trampling on every privilege and everything in us that works for privilege, let us work for that knowledge which will bring the feeling of sameness towards all mankind. You think that because you talk a little more polished language, you are superior to the man in the street. Remember that when you are thinking this, you are not going towards freedom, but are forging a fresh chain for your feet. And above all, if the pride of spirituality enters into you, woe unto you. It is the most awful bondage that ever existed. Neither can wealth nor any other bondage of the human heart bind the soul so much as this. I am purer than others is the most awful idea that can enter into the human heart. In what sense are you pure? The God in you is the God in all. If you have not known this, you have known nothing. How can there be difference? It is all one. Every being in the temple of the Most High. If you can see that, good. If not, spirituality has not yet come to you. End of lecture.